These Old Timbers, written by Brandon Mutin. 1. There is a house that broods atop the steep incline of Mortimer Hill, a leviathan of timber and spite, where the wind sings eulogies through the cracks in its aged skin. I am the keeper of this mausoleum of memories, a solitary sentinel, bound not by chains but by blood, a lineage as withered and gnarled as the ancient oak that stands guard outside my window. My great-grandfather, a man of whom I know only through the hushed and often scandalized tones of family lore, erected this bastion with his own calloused hands. It has since been passed down like a cumbersome heirloom from father to son, each generation etching their existence into the very fibers of the wood, until it fell to me, Elijah Mortimer, the last of our line to inhabit its hollow embrace. I am old now, older than the hill itself it sometimes seems, my bones a symphony of protests with every labored breath. The years have not been kind, paring away at my flesh like a sculptor who has lost his love for the craft, leaving me a sour, bitter husk, alone in a house that refuses to let me rest. My children, if you could call the worms who wriggled from my loins and into the world such a thing, are mere ghosts to me now. They disappeared as surely as smoke on the wind, only to reappear on those distant holidays, their hollow voices through the telephone as unwelcome as the howling of the storm outside. Each word a thinly veiled dance around the subject of my demise and the inheritance they so covet. From my weathered porch, I gaze upon the town below with eyes clouded by disdain. It is a pitiful collection of souls, a festering sore upon the earth, and I delight in imagining divine fire raining upon their heads, washing away the sin and the squalor in a Sodom and Gomorrah cleansing. The sun, in its ceaseless journey across the sky, is my lone companion during these waking hours, its rays a balm against the shadows that skulk within my home. The house, you see, is no sanctuary during the day. Its halls whisper with secrets, the walls watch me with unseen eyes, and every step I take is a trespass against the silence that saturates the air. The sunlight, at least, keeps some of the phantoms at bay, illuminates the corners where darkness likes to fester. But as the sun dips below the horizon and night unfurls its inky shroud, the house takes on a different character. It is no longer merely a place of unease, it becomes a realm of dread. Yet, there is a peculiar comfort in the blanket of night, for in darkness, the things I fear are obscured, if not banished. The imagination is a cruel torturer, but at least in the dark, its instruments are blunted. I cannot speak of my wife without a tremor in my voice, without feeling the sharp sting of tears that seem ever on the brink of spilling. She was the heart of this house, its warmth, its very soul. And though she has been gone these many years, I sense her still. Each creak and groan of the timbers, every inexplicable draft, they are her. I am sure of it, lingering in this place that was once our sanctuary, forever entwined with her essence as I am with the loneliness her absence has wrought. I find myself speaking to her at times, my voice a raspy whisper against the stillness, asking for her guidance, her forgiveness for the bitterness that has seeped into my marrow. The silence that greets me is a chalice of sorrow from which I sip each day, growing ever more intoxicated with the grief. The days, they blend into one another, indistinguishable save for the varying patterns of light and shadow cast through the stained glass windows, relics of a time when beauty was something more than a distant memory. These prisms of color are the only things that seem to pierce the gloom that has settled over the house like a shroud. They paint stories upon the walls, fleeting and ethereal, that flicker and fade as the sun plays across them. On occasion the town below sends up its emissaries, the postman with his saccharine smile, the grocer's boy with his nose too keen for gossip, but I am a fortress unto myself, repelling their feigned concern with grunts and terse nods. They do not understand this place, or the pact it has with the shadows. They do not feel the weight of history that bears down upon my shoulders, a burden I carry with every creaking step through these halls. Nightfall, when it comes, is as much a blessing as it is a curse. The darkness is a cloak that hides the house's leering countenance, but it is also a veil that separates me from the world outside, leaving me to confront the specters that roam these corridors. My footsteps echo through the house as I make my way to my chamber on the top floor, the very heart of this haunted edifice. Here, under the expansive stained glass window that looms above my bed, I find my rest. The window is a mosaic of colors, a shattered rainbow meticulously pieced together by some long-forgotten artisan. During the day, it filters the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of hues that dance across the room, a fleeting beauty that I often think might be a bridge between this world and the next. Lying beneath it, I can almost believe she is with me, my beloved wife, her face illuminated by the heavenly glow of the glass. In these moments, the bitterness that has soured my soul ebbs, and I am left with the purity of my grief, untainted by anger or regret. It is my confessional, this bed, where I lay bare the sins of my existence to the silent judge above. The house groans and settles around me, a lullaby of ancient wood and shifting earth. I close my eyes, and I can hear her whisper in the sighs of the wind, feel her touch in the cool air that drifts through the cracks. It is here, in this place of both beauty and sorrow, that I surrender to the embrace of sleep, the colors of the stained glass window fading into the darkness of my dreams. As I drift off, the house seems to breathe with me, a symbiosis of man and structure. My resentments, my longings, they are known to these walls, soaked into the grain of the wood. The ghosts of my past and the specter of my future all converge under this roof, where the legacy of the Mortimers will eventually fade into oblivion, just as the light outside wanes to the first whispers of night. In the quiet darkness, I am but a vessel of memories, a relic in a reliquary of my own making. The legacy of the Mortimers, with its triumphs and failings, its love and its loss, weaves through my thoughts like the intricate patterns of the stained glass above. I am at once the culmination and the end of this line, the final note in a symphony that has played out over generations, its melody lingering in the air long after the music has stopped. The rhythm of my heart slows, matching the cadence of the night. The house creaks once more, a final acknowledgement of the day's end. There is a strange solace in this nightly ritual, a peace found in the certainty of the house's murmurs, the language of the only companion I have left. My breaths become shallow, my consciousness fading into the realm of sleep, where I might find her waiting for me in dreams that are both a comfort and a torment. The colors of the stained glass window hover in my mind's eye, a spectral dance of light that lulls me into a restless slumber. And so, beneath the celestial tapestry of the stained glass, I lay myself to rest. The world outside is lost to me, the town below just a distant memory, as I surrender to the night, my body a mere husk under the watchful gaze of the window. I am Elijah Mortimer, last of my name, guardian of a fading legacy, ensnared by the past and haunted by the echoes of a life long lived. Tonight, like every night, I find my repose in the embrace of the house my great-grandfather built, a sanctuary for my weary soul, as I wait for the dawn or the darkness, whichever comes to claim me first. 2. The dawning day intruded upon my consciousness with relentless chirrups of winged cherubs, their songs a piercing reminder of the relentless march of time. I was a prisoner of my own flesh, the sinews and bones creaking in protest as I attempted to abandon the realm of Morpheus. The perfidious scent of freshly mown grass clawed at my nostrils, a perverse herald of the world's ceaseless vitality. I dared not hasten my retreat from the sheets, for my limbs bore the heavy scripture of age, each movement etched with the ink of pain. Step by step, I engaged the staircase, those ancient planks of oak that groaned in commiseration with my every move. They, too, knew the weight of years, the burden of bearing. Reaching the nadir, I made passage through the dim corridors, the artifacts of my life leering from the walls, their shadows stretching like long fingers in the early light, clawing at my resolve. With the patience of a martyr, I opened the door that led to the porch, the threshold between my sanctum and the cacophony of life that I so disdained. The air outside struck my cheeks with the impudence of an unwelcome reality, the sun climbing its azure stage with the arrogance of an unbidden star. There I sat, a solitary sentry amidst the creaking of my wicker throne, surveying the town that sprawled before my weary gaze. The houses, like a congregation of the damned, huddled together in their mockery of companionship, their windows gleaming with the deceit of happiness. The people, those tiny artisans of futility, scurried below, weaving their webs of mundane preoccupations, oblivious to the grand charade in which they partook. My disdain for them all swelled like a bitter tide within my chest. Each laugh that scaled the distance to my ears was a dagger of sound, each car that passed with its guttural growl a reminder of the world's incessant, meaningless motion. Children played with the innocence of the unmarked, their joy a flagrant display of ignorance that danced upon the graves of their own forthcoming disillusionments. The hours passed, marked only by the slow procession of the sun across its dominion, shadows shifting like jealous spirits at a grotesque masquerade. The breeze, that capricious consort of the elements, whispered through the leaves with the sibilance of secrets I no longer cared to know. As the day aged and wearied, its vibrant blues began to bruise into purples and oranges, a canvas of dying light that heralded the approach of dusk. I watched with a stoic resignation as the town's fervor waned, the laughter dimming, the footsteps retreating, the lights within homes flickering like the last gasps of day. And then the night came, cloaking the world in its obsidian shroud. The sun, that tyrant of the skies, finally succumbed to the inevitable embrace of night, its fiery crown slipping beneath the horizon with a silent dignity that betrayed none of the turmoil it left in its wake. As darkness flourished, the world transformed before my very eyes, a once familiar landscape, now a stranger cloaked in shadows. The house, my shelter from the relentless march of the outside world, began to stir with an unsettling restlessness. The walls, which had long stood silent and steadfast, now whispered with the faintest creaks, as though the bones of the structure itself were resettling into some new, disquieting form. I hesitated to leave the relative safety of my porch, yet the creeping chill of the night air spurred me onward. I turned to re-enter my abode, and that's when the subtle symphony of agitation commenced. The floorboards moaned beneath my feet with the pained utterances of the damned, each step a chorus of groans from an unseen congregation trapped within the wood. A draught, unbidden and cold as the grave, snaked through the hallway, the ghostly fingers of some invisible hand trailing along my spine, raising the fine hairs on my neck in a silent scream. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, darting away when I turned to catch them squarely, playing a macabre game of hide-and-seek with my fraying sanity. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the parlor, once a comforting heartbeat in the quietude of my solitude, now hammered against my temples with a maddening regularity, each talk a countdown to some unspeakable event that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. In the kitchen, the silverware rattled softly in their drawers, as if stirred by the tremors of a distant earthquake. The windows, those glassy-eyed watchers, rattled in their frames, the panes reflecting not the calm darkness of my home, but a swirling abyss that seemed to beckon me into its depths. I made my way through the house, each familiar corner now a potential alcove for horrors unseen. The very air seemed to grow denser, a miasma of dread that settled upon my shoulders like a mantle woven from the threads of nightmare. From above, there came a sudden thump, a solitary noise that struck like a hammer upon an anvil. I froze, my heart hammering within my chest, a captive bird desperate for release. The silence that followed was suffocating, pregnant with anticipation. And then, a series of soft scrapes, like the scuttling of some loathsome insect, echoed from the attic, the sound drawing closer, as if something were descending the stairs with deliberate, unhurried intent. The air grew thick with the electric charge of fear, each breath a labored gasp as I awaited the emergence of the unknown. Lights flickered overhead, a stroboscopic warning that seemed to keep pace with my quickening heartbeat. The portraits on the walls, those painted snapshots of my lineage, appeared to shift within their frames, their eyes following my every move with an intensity that spoke of judgments passed from beyond the grave. The house, a malevolent orchestra of horror, crescendoed into an unholy deluge that clawed at the very fabric of my soul. Ghostly apparitions began to manifest from the ether, their forms nebulous and shifting, as if painted with the smoke of 1,000 extinguished candles. They swirled around me, their faces contorted masks of anguish and malice, mouths agape in silent screams designed to terrorize. I staggered backward, my heart a drumbeat of terror in the oppressive silence that had fallen. The spectral figures advanced, their forms flickering in and out of existence, each one a grotesque pantomime of human suffering. Their voices, a discordant choir of whispers and wails, infiltrated my mind, seeking to unhinge the fragile sanctuary of my sanity. "Leave me!" I cried out, my voice a frail barrier against their relentless assault. The spirits, undeterred, pressed closer, their icy breath a gossamer shroud enveloping me, their hollow eyes pools of despair into which I feared I would be irrevocably drawn. As I turned to flee, a voice, soft and melodic, cut through the din, a siren call that anchored me amidst the storm of phantoms. "Elijah," it beckoned, and in that single utterance, a lifetime of memories flooded my senses. It was her voice, the voice of my beloved Eleanor. Whirling around, my breath caught in my throat at the sight of her. There she stood, as radiant as the day we first met, untouched by the ravages of the illness that had stolen her from me. She was dressed in the simple elegance of her youth, her skin aglow with a light that seemed to emanate from within. The terror that gripped me melted into a profound longing, and I moved toward her, arms outstretched, yearning to envelop her in an embrace that would bridge the chasm between life and death. But as I drew near, the cruel mirage began to unravel. The visage of my Eleanor twisted and contorted before my eyes. Maggots cascaded from the hollows, where her eyes once sparkled with life. Worms wriggled forth from the burrows of her ears, a grotesque parody of the delicate earrings she once favored. A tide of insects poured from her mouth with each word she attempted to form, and the air became thick with the stench of decay, a miasma that choked the very breath from my lungs. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward as the abomination that wore my wife's face advanced, reaching out with arms that decayed before my eyes, the skin sloughing away to reveal the writhing death beneath. "No! This is not you, Eleanor!" I screamed, my voice a ragged edge that tore at the silence. I turned and fled, my mind a whirlwind of despair and confusion, the house's walls seeming to close in around me, eager to swallow me whole. I burst from the house, the night air a bitter, cold slap against my face. Behind me, the house loomed like a mausoleum, its windows darkened eyes that watched my flight with an inscrutable gaze. I ran without direction, without purpose, save for the need to escape the nightmare. As I wandered aimlessly through the gnarled embrace of my property, the realization struck with the force of a tempest. There was nowhere for me to go. The town that sprawled beneath the shadow of my hilltop domain had long since turned its back on me, as I had on it. In the eyes of those who dwelled within, I was but a specter, an eccentric relic atop the hill, as much a part of the local folklore as the ghost stories and legends that mothers whispered to their children to invoke obedience. In this moment of profound isolation, my thoughts turned unexpectedly to my progeny, those serpentine charlatans clad in the guise of kinship. The realization that I was indeed their sire, despite the venom that coursed through their veins, was a fetid pill to swallow. They coveted my inheritance with the rapacity of vultures circling a carcass, yet even this pittance, a mere shadow of my once great wealth, was insufficient to satisfy their avaricious desires. Their legacy would not be one of financial gain, I vowed. The Mortimer Manor, with its labyrinthine halls and suffocating shadows, would not ensnare another generation with its maddening whispers and eldritch horrors. My resolve hardened like the steel of Damocles' sword, and with a clarity that cut through the fog of dread, I turned toward the tool shed, my sanctuary of implements and apparatus. The jerrycan lay just where I had left it, its metal hide glinting dully in the moonlight that filtered through the grimy windows. My hands, though unsteady with age and terror, gripped the canister with surprising strength. The urge to flee, to abandon this cursed estate and the memories it harbored, clawed at the fringes of my mind, desperate to take hold. But I would not yield. I would not permit this malevolent edifice to claim another soul. With grim determination, I retraced my steps, ascending the stairs with the jerrycan's weight, a grim reminder of my purpose. Each step creaked with the mournful dirge of the condemned, a grim accompaniment to my funereal march. The manor seemed to sense my intent, the air thickening with a palpable dread, as if the very fabric of the house were coiling, preparing to strike. I began my work in the attic, the site of my most recent torment, where the memories of Eleanor's twisted visage still seared my mind. The scent of gasoline was pungent, a stark contrast to the mustiness of the attic, as I doused the ancient trunks and scattered ephemera of generations past. The liquid sloshed onto the wood, darkening it with the promise of destruction. Room by room, I continued my grim task. The parlor, where the grandfather clock ticked with torturous precision, the kitchen with its rattling silverware, the hallway, where shadows once danced at the edge of my sanity, all were baptized in the acrid perfume of petrol. The portraits of my ancestors gazed down upon me with a gravitas that belied their inanimate nature. If they judged me, their painted eyes gave no indication, their expressions frozen in time. Yet as I reached the final corridor, where the lineage of the Mortimer family culminated with my own likeness, I hesitated before my own frame. The eyes that stared back at me from the canvas seemed to hold a depth of understanding, a silent commiseration for the dreadful task at hand. With a shuddering breath, I anointed my own portrait with the volatile liquid, the brush strokes of my visage now dripping with the sheen of inevitable conflagration. The house now reeked of gasoline, each room a chamber in a tomb awaiting its final tenant. My heart was a leaden drum, its beats echoing through the silence with a hollow cadence. I descended the grand staircase, my hand trailing along the banister, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers for what would be the last time. In the foyer, I stood amidst the pools of gasoline, the fumes clawing at my throat. The flint and steel from my pocket felt unnervingly final in my hands. I struck it once, the spark a fleeting star in the dimness. The second strike caught, and the flame was born, a tiny beacon that quivered with the potential of devastation. The fire caught the gasoline with a whoosh, a starving beast that consumed the fuel with fervent greed. Flames licked upwards, caressing the walls with destructive tenderness. I backed away, watching as the inferno began to claim the Mortimer Manor, my prison of memories and madness. The heat pressed against my face, a wall of searing air that threatened to engulf me. But I did not waver. This pyre was a necessary sacrilege, a cleansing fire to purge the malevolence that had seeped into the very bones of the structure. As I turned away, the inferno's roar filled my ears, a terrible symphony that spoke of endings and beginnings. I stumbled through the garden, the once meticulously kept hedges now overgrown and wild, as if they too had given up on the pretense of civilization. The town below seemed to awaken, lights flickering on as the glow of the fire painted the night sky with a warning. I could imagine the voices, the stirring of the community as they witnessed the demise of the Mortimer Manor, an event that would no doubt become etched in the town's collective memory. The sirens wailed in the distance, a chorus of alarm rising to meet the crescendo of destruction, but their urgency was a world away. I stood in the garden, a lone figure cast in the fiery glow that now consumed the Mortimer Manor. My legacy was going up in flames, a monstrous pyre that devoured the years of solitude and sorrow that had seeped into the walls of the ancient house. As I watched the fire ravage the manor, the blaze reflected in my eyes, an inferno mirroring the turmoil within my soul. And then, amidst the furious dance of fire and smoke, a figure appeared, Eleanor. She stood within the flames, not as the grotesque specter that had haunted the attic, but as the vision of loveliness I had fallen in love with so many years before. Her dress billowed around her, untouched by the fire that roared all around, her expression one of serene invitation. In her presence, the unbearable heat seemed to recede, a gentle warmth that beckoned rather than burned. My heart, which had been so heavy with despair and determination, now fluttered with an aching tenderness. The pain of my aged body, the weight of my years, fell away as I took a step towards the burning threshold. I knew then with a clarity that pierced the smoke-filled night. My time upon this earth was drawing to a close. The thought did not fill me with fear, but with a profound sense of release. I had lived beyond my years, a prisoner of memory and grief, and now Eleanor had returned to liberate me from my earthly bonds. I moved toward the manor, the heat intensifying as I approached, but my eyes never left Eleanor's ethereal figure. There was no room for doubt, no space for second thoughts. I stepped into the flames, which seemed to part before me, an honor guard heralding my final passage. "Eleanor," I called softly, my voice steady amid the roar of the fire. She extended her hand, a gesture as natural as if no time had passed between us, as if the veil of death had never severed our union. I took her hand in mine, the sensation ethereal, a connection that transcended flesh and bone. The house groaned and creaked around us, a symphony of destruction that could not mar the beauty of our reunion. We began to dance, a slow, graceful waltz that defied the chaos of our surroundings. The flames leapt and twirled with us, partners in this final, fervent display of defiance and love. There, in the heart of the inferno, I found peace. The years of loneliness, the ache of loss, the bitterness of time, all were washed away in the embrace of my beloved. We moved together, our dance a silent testament to a love that had endured beyond the confines of mortal existence. As the world outside the manor continued its inexorable march, within the embrace of the flames, time ceased to have meaning. The fire would consume all, erasing the legacy of the Mortimers, but it could not touch the eternal bond between two souls reunited at last. In the dance of the inferno, I was home.